What's up? What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of Part of the Problem. I am Dave Smith. I am rolling solo for this episode, and we got a bunch of stuff to talk about. So let me just quickly get a few some business out of the way. So of course, tomorrow, me and Robbie the Fire Bernstein will be in Louisville, Kentucky. The show is damn near close to sold out. I think there might be like 7 seats left right now. So if you're listening to this live, if you want to come out to the Louisville shows tomorrow night, make sure you go do that immediately. ComicDaveSmith.com has the ticket link. It's the first link up there. And then there are still a few seats left, but they're selling very quick in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So hope to see a bunch of you guys out there this weekend. Really looking forward to these shows. And then we've got, I believe Key West is the next one coming up after that. And then there's Buffalo, Chicago, Boston, a bunch of dates are up on the site, comicdavesmith.com. The other thing is, reminder, February 11th is fast approaching. I will be debating Josh Hammer, the senior editor at Newsweek, over the U.S.-Israel relationship and its effects on U.S. foreign policy. That'll be here in New Jersey at Princeton University. There still are some seats left for that, last I heard, which was yesterday, but they were selling very fast. So both of those things, if you want to come to them, move quickly. And for the debate in Princeton, I believe it is, if you're not in the area, it is going to be live streamed, and it's I'm pretty sure I had a meeting about this yesterday, but I'm pretty sure they said that like the live stream will also be able to participate in the Oxford style debate. So like you'll get to vote before and after, so you're like involved. And I think you can also submit questions for the question and answer segment. So you can like still participate even if you're not in the New Jersey area. Looking forward to all of those events. So yeah, hope to see some of you guys out there. Okay. Now I want to, for today's episode, as we speak, Bobby Kennedy is going through his Senate confirmation hearing. So we're going to talk a bit about that. And then, of course, Tulsi Gabbard and Kash Patel are coming up next. So I thought maybe we'd preview those a little bit. It's very interesting for people like me who are kind of, unhealthily obsessed with all of this stuff. It's a particularly fascinating chapter in American history. I guess maybe the first thing I would say, I have some clips from what's happened this morning in Bobby Kennedy's Senate confirmation hearings, which I thought would be worth playing and discussing a little bit. I guess the thing I would say up top is it just can't be overstated how different this is than anything that's happened in politics in my lifetime. It's just nothing in modern American politics has ever been quite like this. We've never seen a Senate confirmation process of somebody to run the health department who has basically been, he ran for president and has been an activist for many years before that. And his whole thing was championing, being against the corruption in the health department. Someone like Tulsi Gabbard, whose entire political career has been about criticizing the corruption of the intelligence agencies, is now up for the job of being in charge of the intelligence agencies. This is not, there's no other comparison. There's simply just nothing like this that's happened in my lifetime. And so that right away is very interesting. And the reaction to that, of course, is interesting. I was on, I just recorded with Emily from Breaking Points. I was just recording with her a few minutes before we started this show. And one of the questions she asked me was by the way, I think she's great. I always really enjoy talking to her. But one of the questions she asked me at one point was like, Tulsi, we'll get to Tulsi in a little bit, but we were talking about her a lot. And she was saying like, this is really kind of unprecedented that she's getting so much pushback on her confirmation, and she may not even make it out of the Senate Intelligence Committee's confirmation, let alone even get to the Senate. And I was just like saying like, well, that's not really the surprising. The thing that's unique about this isn't that she's getting this pushback. The thing that's unique about this is that she's even up for confirmation at all. And I think it's important to understand that, and a lot of this, it really gets to the heart of why I ended up ultimately supporting Donald Trump, and I think while a lot of more dissident type of people ended up supporting Donald Trump, even people like me who didn't support him in 2016, didn't support him in 2020, and were very critical of his first administration. The reason why a lot of us ended up going, in some ways kind of like, crap, I think I gotta support this guy this time, is because it's just a unique opportunity. And the only way we get here is if Donald Trump had won this election. And I think that, look, it's the reason why this never happened before. The reason why there was never somebody appointed to be the HHS director whose entire career was criticizing the corruption in of U.S. health, and particularly in the U.S. Health Department. The reason why this never happened before is because, first of all, it would have been unthinkable for any of the previous presidents, including Trump in his first term, to actually put people like this up. And there's just zero chance they ever could have been confirmed. I mean, if you were to think of, like my entire lifetime, if you were to think of George H.W. Bush or Bill Clinton or George W. Bush or Barack Obama, or like, obviously they never would have picked people like this. But then on top of that, there's just no way they would have been confirmed. Imagine Bobby Kennedy trying to say the stuff he's saying now in the year 1999 or something like that, or 2000, or so. It never would have resonated. They would have been, the Senate would have immediately rejected them. The only reason, like, the reason why Bobby Kennedy's message is resonating so much right now is largely because of COVID, and because during COVID, the biggest scientific institutions, not just in America, but worldwide, just completely discredited themselves. And just nobody trusts them anymore. And the corruption was so apparent that when somebody came out and was pointing a finger with a lot of people, you can only have the entire scientific community. I mean, think about it, like a moment when most regular people don't really pay attention to the scientific community that much. They don't really pay attention to the CDC or the NIH or the health department or any of this, the World Health Organization, but there's this moment in time where they demand that everybody pay attention to this. I liked Candace Owens did one debate on Piers Morgan's show about Israel, and I loved the way she put this. But she goes, a lot of us never really paid attention to Israel, and then after October 7th, the demand was that we pay attention to it, and then we started paying attention to it. And a lot of you people who were demanding we paid attention to it now sure wish we hadn't. And I think it was really profound in its simplicity. I think that's what happened during COVID. A lot of people it was demanded of them that they start paying attention to science in a way that they never had before. And most people, myself included, had never done deep dives on virology and, never really thought about mRNA vaccines. This was kind of hoist upon us. And then in this moment where you demanded that we all pay attention to it, as we started paying attention to it, we noticed that you guys were all fucking lying every goddamn time your mouth moved. And, like really basic lies that you can't get around them. They come out. 15 days to flatten the curve was not 15 days. It was quite a bit longer than that. And this all the mask compliance, the outdoor masking. I mean, people were pushing outdoor masks. It's the most anti-scientific policy ever. It makes absolutely no sense. There was, and this was confirmed in a big New York Times piece and several other major peer-reviewed studies, but they are not, it is not, there is not one proven case of COVID being transmitted from outdoor casual interactions. Not one. Like, it's just, it doesn't happen. Yet you were supposed to wear a mask everywhere. It was totally anti-scientific. And then, of course, the stuff with the vaccine, where they just lied through their teeth and just said, hey, there's this vaccine. It's a cure. It's 100% effective. It's safe. If you get it, you can't be vaccine injured. You can't get COVID and you can't transmit COVID. And then everybody you know who got the thing got COVID after it. I mean, that's enough that you can't even hide it from normies who don't pay attention that much. And so then when Bobby Kennedy came along and said, hey, you know how they were cooking the books on that vaccine? They were doing that on a lot of the other vaccines. This message just resonated. So the point is, this message never could have resonated in any previous era. And the Senate would have just rejected somebody like this because they're there to protect powerful interests. We live in a little bit of a different moment right now. And now it's not just that this message is resonating, but now you've got a new president in there who's been burned by the system in a, about as serious a way as you can be, or about in every way that you can be. And now the Senate is in a little bit of an interesting position because they are still political creatures. And there's always a small d democratic influence on government, no matter what type of system of government you have. In some sense, we always live in a democracy. And what I mean by that is, I'm sure some of you have heard me explain this before, but what I mean is that, let's say you're in a country with under a dictatorship. Okay, this is not a democracy. This is an authoritarian dictatorship where the dictator rules with an iron fist. And let's say that there are some protests. Let's say there's a huge protest movement. There are 500,000 angry civilians outside the dictator's palace demanding policy X. It's not going to be too long until that dictator goes, I've thought about it and I'm instituting policy X. Now, I don't mean that when I talk about this democratic spirit, I don't mean that you hold regular elections necessarily. It's just that the bottom line is that there's way more of us than there are of them. And this is the game of ruling. They're aware of that. This, by the way, is why the most powerful people in our society are constantly pushing issues that divide the American people. This is really at the heart of where there's the obsession with trans bathrooms and stuff like this, abortion, issues like this, issues that are white hot culture war issues that divide the population are constantly pumped out from every single power center, everyone. And the reason is that this is what they call divide and conquer, right? You have to divide people if you're going to rule over them, because there's so many more of them than there are of you. And if they ever get united and realize that, hey, somebody's ruling over us and they're screwing us over, then they might come for you. And then really at the end of the day, there's only, there's only so many billionaires. There's only so many rulers. There's a lot more, but of the people who are ruled in this country, there's hundreds of millions of us. And so the Senate is in this position where the people have kind of spoken, and now they have to try to find a way to protect powerful interests while not pissing off the masses, which is a much more dangerous proposition for them. And I mean, we were talking about on the last show, the immigration data or the immigration polling data, which is just like, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable how far the Biden administration pushed this country to the right on immigration. And it's not just immigration, but when it comes to like probably maybe like 4 or 5 big issues, immigration, foreign wars, woke ideology, and overall government corruption, the American people have spoken. Like it's just overwhelming. They're against this corruption. And to me, this is what Bobby Kennedy now finds himself in, this situation of representing all of that. One of the things I was talking to Emily about earlier today is that to some degree, we live in kind of a post-ideological world right now. No, I don't mean that entirely. And I certainly think that I'm not saying that like ideology doesn't matter. I still am, in my heart of hearts, I'm a theory guy. I mean, I believe in like libertarian philosophy. So I'm not saying none of that matters. It's just that in many ways, the real divide right now is not left versus right, or even authoritarian versus libertarian. In many ways, the divide right now is just corruption versus honesty. It's kind of as simple as that. People wonder sometimes, it's like, look, like obviously for people who know, Bobby Kennedy was on the podcast twice. They were two of our biggest episodes we've ever done. And the first time it was just like a love fest. I just loved everything he was saying, and we just had a great time. The second time we really got into a pretty heated argument over Israel. And I don't know, it's things got a little bit uncomfortable there for a minute with us, although I think our relationship is actually pretty good now, and we've texted back and forth several like nice things since that happened. And he reached out to me after I debated Chris Cuomo and told me that he thought I did a great job on that, and I really appreciated that. And I've reached out to him several times, including I shot him a text today, just giving him like a "give him hell, we're behind you" type text. He didn't respond, but he was pretty busy today, so I'll let that one slide. One of the things that I think, even though obviously me and Bobby have major foreign policy disagreements, well, when it comes to Israel, not really when it comes, I'm right there with him when it comes to the Ukraine stuff. But it's not, first off, he's at the health department, so it's not, it was kind of nice in a way. I could just go back to loving the guy because he's not, making foreign policy decisions. He's making decisions on the issue that he's great on. But I think that the real appeal of Bobby Kennedy, and the reason why so many like MAGA people are getting behind him, and why so many libertarians are getting behind him, it's not that, because people will point out sometimes, they'll say like, but he's a liberal. I mean, he's an old school Democrat. So why would conservative Republicans like him? Why would libertarians like him? Why do you guys all support a guy who doesn't even have your same ideology? And the thing that they're missing is that we live in a post-ideological world in a lot of ways. It's not about the fact that we have the same ideology. It's not about whether, he might believe that the answer is more regulation over certain areas, whereas I believe the answer is less regulation. It's a matter of the fact that it's that he's not part of the corrupt swamp. That's the whole point. And the reason why so many MAGA people and so many libertarians are behind Bobby Kennedy is because you look at a guy like Bobby, and this is the most impressive thing about the guy. And he's an impressive guy. Like, just objectively speaking, he's an impressive guy. And he's a guy in his 60s who can do more pull-ups than most guys in their 20s. That's, however you spit, that's objectively impressive. The guy has a wealth of knowledge on a wide range of issues. It's impressive. But the thing that's most impressive about Bobby Kennedy is that he's a Kennedy. He's a part of American royalty, or as close as you can get to it. It's certainly American political royalty. And then he's married to like a beloved, famous Hollywood actress. And so the point is, this guy had it made. Now listen, I'm not trying to downplay. Obviously, he's had personal tragedies in his life. The guy's father and uncle were both murdered as young men, and his family's just had a lot of tragedy in it. So I'm not trying to like downplay that. I'm just saying that, relatively speaking, the guy had a good life guaranteed to him. I mean, he's in at every fancy cocktail party. He's beloved by the powerful. He's like got it made in the shade. And then he chooses to take a stand that's going to get him completely alienated in that world. Now, people can, and especially the people who are like just obsessed with theory. I get this from libertarians sometimes, but he's not a real libertarian. It's like, okay, what have you ever sacrificed that's on the level of what Bobby sacrificed in order to fight for something that you believe in? That is impressive. And I think that's what draws a lot of us to him. And look, whether you believe in more regulation or less regulation or whatever, who can just deny the ungodly amount of corruption that's at the center of our health industry in America? It's unbelievable. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is My Patriot Supply. Guys, the last few years have seen a lot of instability. And though a lot of people are optimistic about the new administration coming in, the truth is nobody can protect you from every foreseeable emergency. And that's why I always like to make sure that I have my family protected with a 4-week emergency food kit from My Patriot Supply. Their 4-week emergency food kit gives you the nutrition you need to stay strong in a crisis. With 2,000 calories per day and 100% of your daily value of 12 essential vitamins and minerals, this kit keeps you going when every meal matters. And right now, they're offering $50 off their 4-week food kit. So go to preparewithsmith.com to get your 4-week food kit today. All right, let's get back into the show. Okay. All that being said, people are freaking out about Bobby Kennedy. The former vice president, Mike Pence, has been working relentlessly on this campaign of trying to make sure he's not confirmed. It's been wild to see. Let's check in. We got a few clips here lined up. Let's just start playing some of them so we could get a little bit of a taste for what's been going on today on the Senate floor.
Because you keep citing the Trump administration and you're just going to follow what they say. Is that what you're doing? You're just a rubber stamp for them in this position? So anybody, so it doesn't matter that you're before us. It could be anybody coming before us as long as they're a rubber stamp for this administration and disregarding your beliefs and what you think. I guess my question to you is, if it really is fundamental to what you believe, how do you live with that? How do you address those issues as you're moving forward, knowing that it's going to harm Americans? Yeah.
You want me to answer the question?
No, I'm asking you.
Okay. President Trump has asked me to end the chronic disease epidemic and make America healthy again. And I'm
So
in
is that the only reason why you're
at
at HHS? Is that the only reason why then you're at the HHS, to address that one issue?
President Trump has asked me because I'm in a unique position to end that. And that is what I'm doing. And if we don't solve that problem, Senator, all the other disputes we have about who's paying, and whether it's insurance companies, whether it's providers, whether it's HMOs, whether it's patients or families, all of those are moving deck chairs around on the Titanic. Our ship is sinking. Our 60% increase in Medicaid over the past 4 years is the biggest budget line now, and it's growing faster than any other. And no other nation in the world has what we have here. No other nation has a chronic disease. We have the highest chronic disease burden of any country in the world. We had, during COVID, we had 16% of the COVID deaths in a country. We only have 4.2% of the world's population. We had a higher death count than any country in the world. And when CDC was asked why, they said it's because Americans are the sickest people on earth. The average person who died from COVID, American, had 3.8 chronic diseases. This is an existential threat economically, to our military, to our health, to our sense of well-being. And it is a priority for President Trump. And that's why he asked me to run the agency. And if I'm privileged to be confirmed, that's exactly what I'll do.
So I thought this one was an interesting clip for a few reasons. I mean, obviously you have the grandstanding senator. You have her as badgering Bobby, and then at a certain point, he's like, "Do you want me to answer the question?" And she's like, "I'm asking you the question." It's all just ridiculous. But look, I mean, like his answer there, he's just knocked it out of the park. And I remember talking about a lot of this stuff when, during COVID, that it was like, I forget the exact numbers, but it was, I guess he just said 3.8 comorbidities for the average COVID death. It was, I believe it was 78% of the people hospitalized with COVID were obese. And like, there's no question that he is right about that. And as he mentioned, even the CDC admitted this themselves, that the reason why Americans were so disproportionately hit hard with COVID was because we're so sick. We're such a sick society. And, you'd think maybe that would come up. Maybe that would be like an issue to think about. Why? Because as people know, COVID was pretty mild. Speaking statistically here, obviously there are exceptions, but COVID was pretty mild and really didn't lead to too many negative outcomes for healthy people. Everybody just about who's healthy got COVID, and almost all of them, if you're thinking about them in your head right now, they're almost all fine. Now, who was really bad when they got COVID? Well, it's really old people, right? But it's not because they're old. It's because old people are really sick. It has nothing to do with your age. It's just that your immune system is not in great shape by the time you get old. That's unfortunately part of life. But this is why America makes up 16% of the world's COVID deaths when we're only 4% of the population. And it's because we're such a sick society. And how on earth does this never come up until Bobby Kennedy brings it up? He's like the only person in politics who ever forced this issue. It's so goddamn heroic and paradigm shifting. Like it's unbelievable. When it's also just when you listen to the way they kind of try to attack him with this line of like, oh, so you're just a rubber stamp for Donald Trump because he had said that I serve at the pleasure of the president, which is typically what people appointed by the president would say. It's nothing very strange about that. But this idea that it's like, oh, so it doesn't even matter if it's you or someone else. It's just Donald Trump. Basically, you're just like a blind Trump loyalist it doesn't even matter if it's against your own convictions. I mean, who's buying this? Like listen, I'm not sitting here trying to knock Donald Trump. I voted for him in this last election, and I'm hoping he does a really great job, as every American should be right now. Let's hope he does good things for the country. But who really believes that Donald Trump is the one leading Bobby's pursuit of cleaning up the health department? Really? It's Donald Trump who's been influencing Bobby Kennedy to talk about how we lead the world in chronic illness? Did you ever hear Donald Trump ever talking about that before Bobby Kennedy came on board with his team? Did you ever hear Donald Trump? Come on. This is obviously Bobby's pet issue that either he persuaded Donald Trump that this is an issue worth pursuing, or, he was a third party who was getting millions of votes, and Donald Trump realized he could take that into his coalition, or a mix of both of those two things, which is probably my guess, that it's a mix of both of those two things. But this line that like somehow it's really just what like Bobby Kennedy at the health department is somehow just going to be a pawn of Donald Trump. Who's buying that? It's just too ridiculous. Who's buying? Yes, Donald Trump was pouring through the studies on the effects of on vaccines on young children's development, right? We all believe that, right? Donald Trump's just sitting down reading medical studies at night. No, he's not. He's watching shows. Donald Trump's watching Hannity while Bobby Kennedy pores over the data. Let's get real. I mean, come on. For all the knocks these people have had on Trump for so many years, but now we're supposed to believe that he's what, the health nut expert? Yes, Donald Trump, in between sucking down Big Macs, Donald Trump was really worried about the nation's health, and then Bobby Kennedy is just a pawn there to be used. Too absurd. All right, let's go to the next clip.
All of these things cannot be true. So, are you lying to Congress today when you say you are pro-vaccine, or did you lie on all those podcasts?
As you know, because it's been repeatedly debunked, that statement that I made on the Lex Friedman podcast was a fragment of the statement. I said there are no vaccines that are safe and effective, and I was going to continue for every person. Every medicine has people who are sensitive to them. including vaccines.
Right. So
He interrupted me at that point. I've corrected it many times, including on national TV. You know about this, Senator Wyden. So bringing this up right now is dishonest.
all of these things.
I thought that was pretty great. You know, there's always something about like the nerve of these senators to call anyone else a liar. And again, I just love that Bobby's a little bit, you know, more of a gentleman than I am. You know, like I couldn't imagine even being called like, I couldn't imagine being called a liar by a politician and not just immediately, you know, responding with something like, Senator, did you just call me a liar? You're a senator. You're by definition a liar. That's what you people do. And then going through all the lies that they've told. But look, this is just stuff that I like that he said, I've made this clear on national television, and you know that. Like, you know this. There's no way you're looking into Bobby Kennedy at this level. Like, you're getting ready for the Senate confirmation hearings about him, and you're concerned about his view on vaccines. And like, you haven't been able to find the numerous times that he's discussed this. And like, I remember getting the same thing during COVID, during the craze of the COVID vaccine, when, you know, and I was somebody who had never really, you know, done a lot of research on vaccines before, but, you know, I was hosting a show 3 days a week during all of COVID. And so I dove really deep and read a lot about the COVID vax. And I'd be like, oh, they are totally lying to you about this. Like, it's not just like, oh, they were getting it wrong, or they made a bet and that bet turned out to be wrong. It's like they were making claims about the vaccine that the trial data in no way backed up. Like the claim that you can't transmit COVID once you've had the vaccine. There was absolutely nothing in any of the clinical trials that would even lead you to assume that, let alone conclusively prove it. In fact, it wasn't even tested. And so I would point that out, and then response would be like, oh, Dave's an anti-vaxxer now. And you're like, anti-vax? I'm just pointing out one specific lie. And so Bobby, you know, has just made this point over and over and over again that his issue isn't with vaccines. He's not against vaccines. He's saying there should be good studies, double-blind studies done on all of them, so we have better information about them. The problem is no one can really argue with that. And so they have to just say, you know, you hate vaccines, right? It's like, you hate America. It's all the same thing. Just like you have this irrational blanket hatred for something when he's making a much more specific claim. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Sheath Underwear, the underwear of legends, longtime sponsor of the Part of the Problem podcast. They are one of our most loyal sponsors. And I got to say, I love them for that. And it's also just an incredible product. I mean, I really do wear Sheath underwear every single day. It's the most comfortable pair of boxer briefs you're ever going to buy. So if you want to support this show and get yourself the best pair of boxer briefs you've ever owned in the process, well, the only place you can do that is at sheathunderwear.com, and use the promo code problem20 to get 20% off your order. They ship anywhere in the world. Sheathunderwear.com, promo code problem20 for 20% off your order. All right, let's get back into the show. All right, let's go to the next one.
Make sure that Americans are aware. But I don't want to take food away from anybody. If you like a cheeseburger, a McDonald's cheeseburger, a Diet Coke, which my boss loves, and you should be able to get them. If you want to eat Hostess Twinkies, you should be able to do that. But you should know what the impacts are on your family and on your health. Make sure that America.
Okay, so this one I found to be very interesting because I actually this was kind of clarifying in a way for me about what Bobby Kennedy's position here really is. And I got to say, I think, to take it back to being a theory bro, you know, even though I made that point about being post-ideological, which I only mean, you know, partially, but that to me was like pretty damn libertarian, what Bobby Kennedy said there. And that's essentially how I feel about this stuff. You know, I think so, like I said, to take it back to theory a little bit, right? I don't believe in any type of like government prohibitions on ingredients or things like that. But I do think you get to a point where, like, look, even the most free market libertarian type person or something, if you had, let's say you had a store, you own a store, and you're selling sugar. Let's say you're selling a big bag of sugar and you market sugar, but instead of putting sugar in it, you put rat poison in it. All right. Well, that's a crime. I mean, that's attempted murder, at least, maybe murder if someone ends up consuming it and dying. Like, you can't do that. And that ought to be illegal. And so in a sense, it's kind of like I'm almost like setting up a reductio absurdum. But so, okay, if you take it to that extreme, obviously that would be, and so I don't know exactly what the correct answer is in the middle here, but there is no question that, like, look, we live in a society where and this is something, Nicole Shanahan, who was Bobby's running mate, and she's a friend and has been on the podcast a couple times. I really enjoyed our conversations. As she made this point the last time she was on the show, or maybe the first time, one of the times she was on the show, she made this point where she was like, for people our age, and I believe me and her are about the same age, we were almost like the first generation that grew up with the stuff in supermarkets that we have today, but our parents didn't know anything about it. They just didn't know. And I'm not even blaming them. Like, there was a true ignorance about it. And, if when in my grandmother's day, if you were eating bread, like if you bought bread from the grocery store, you were eating bread. That's what it was. It was bread. And then by the time I was a kid, if you were buying bread at the grocery store, I do think that most of our parents thought they were buying bread. Now, okay, the ingredients were on the back. I'm not trying to make an argument that, like, there's no buyer beware or anything like that. But when you think about it more broadly, yeah, they were kind of defrauded. I mean, like, when my grandmother bought bread, it would have been like, whatever, flour, wheat, yeast, and like 2 other ingredients, whatever the freaking ingredients in bread are. But by the time I was a kid, if you were buying a loaf of bread at the store, you were buying poison. And now, and this is the point Nicole Shanahan was making, now we're like the first generation who actually realized that, and we're raising kids in this environment. And I will tell you that, going to the grocery store, which, okay, I don't do too much of, but I have been a few times. And my wife talks about this all the time. It's like, they freaking, dude, like if you just go down like the breakfast cereal aisle, they are so dirty. I mean, they literally sell at a premium the space that meets the kids' eyes. So like the lower shelves will have, like, they charge more money to get that spot at the grocery store. And then they have the most like colorful, like boxes. It's all like, the stuff we all grew up on, like Fruit Loops with a toucan and like all these bright red and blue, and it's all like designed to sell to children, and it's fucking poison. Okay, maybe it's not exactly my example of sugar being swapped out for rat poison, but it's something approaching that. It's a really weird challenge when you're raising little kids, and like 80% of the supermarket's fucking poison. Now, Bobby here is saying, like, okay, I'm not saying we should ban any of that stuff, but shouldn't they have to kind of label it? Shouldn't you know that? Shouldn't like the starting point be that, like, you have to disclose that this is poison, particularly if we know scientifically that it is? Because who the hell, like, nobody is just like buying their kids cigarettes when they're 5, but people are buying Fruit Loops for their kids. And by the way, I'm not sure what's worse. I'm not sure anybody's actually sure what's worse. We in this country fought like a war on tobacco. And this was a big thing. It really started when I was a kid, but it wasn't just that, like, and I mean, the government did this, the government hauled the big tobacco executives in front of Congress. They did a lot to try to break up the companies. They put all types of taxes on cigarettes, drove the prices through the roof. The state governments one by one until it was all of them, I think, banned smoking in bars and public places. It's banned on airplanes. It's banned in airports. I mean, there's all types of restrictions that were put on cigarettes. And the justification was that they're really unhealthy. They're really bad for you. And no question about that. Cigarettes are bad for you. You know, there's no question. But I'll tell you, as somebody who travels around the country, you know, I travel around and, okay, you know, it's people don't smoke nearly as much as they used to. A lot of people vape now, which I do think is better than smoking, but whatever, the Zyn pouches and things like that, certainly much better than smoking. But everywhere you go in this country, everywhere you go, there's a McDonald's and a Burger King and an Arby's and a Wendy's and a KFC. And, you know, there's just, and everywhere you go, there's just obese people everywhere. And you're like, look, man, like we did this whole thing in the name of health. And then yet, look at all this. Look at this. And there, at the very least, no matter where you fall on this politically or what you think the legal answer to this should be, I can't for the life of me understand an argument for why we shouldn't be talking about this, or this should not be like a major concern. And in fact, as Nicole and Bobby have pointed out many times, you're talking about our children being sick, like throughout the whole country. What could be a bigger priority than that? The health of our children? What comes above that? Because from my perspective, nothing. All right, let's play the next clip. There we go.
15% of American youth are now on Adderall or some other ADHD medication. Even higher percentages are on SSRIs and benzos. We are not just over-medicating our children, we're over-medicating our entire population. Half the pharmaceutical drugs on Earth are now sold here. 70% of the profits from pharmaceutical companies are from the United States, even though we only have 4.2% of the world's population. Not only that, but a recent study by Cochrane Collaboration founder Peter Ghosh found that pharmaceutical drugs are the third largest cause of death in our country after heart attacks and cancers. Oh, they're not making us healthier. We need community health initiatives. We need access to treatment. We need exercise. We need better food. 15% of Americans are now on Adderall or
100%. And again, this is something that just very rarely comes up in American politics, but Bobby is 100% right about this. I mean, it is sickening how over-medicated as a society we are. And the fact that it's been done to children is just, oh my God, I mean, it's appalling. It's appalling. I mean, you know, again, I encourage people to go like do a little bit of research into the history of like a lot of these pharmaceutical drugs. The Adderall is a good one to start with. It's unbelievable. You kind of like from the outside looking in, and this is just unfortunately the way people are. And I shouldn't even say unfortunately, it's necessarily the way people are. And we specialize, you know, you have the division of labor. You know, if you think of the most like if you try to think of like the most primitive form of economics, right? Like the most primitive form of economics you could think of being like picture like a guy living in a cabin that he built himself in the woods. And you know, he's has to chop down trees in order to build a house. Now, technically this is economics now, okay? Because and anytime that you're transforming natural goods into some type of product, then you're technically speaking, you're in the realm of economics. So if you are chopping down a tree to build a cabin, this is an economic activity. You're transforming a natural good into an economic good, right? Like you're making this, you're transforming the tree into something that can give you shelter. But so if you imagine this, like maybe there's a husband and their wife and maybe a couple like 13-year-olds that, you'd start working as soon as you were able-bodied. And maybe you're like, you have to build your own home. You have to make your own clothes. You have to make, like, this is the most primitive form of economics, is you having to do everything. Okay. And as economies advance, even in the most basic steps, right? Like if you would think of like an advancement would be like, okay, so you chop down trees and you're making like furniture, you're building a chair or something like that, or a bed. And then your neighbor has a bunch of chickens. And so he'll trade you a couple chickens and some eggs for a chair. Now, that's when an economy starts. As soon as an economy starts progressing is when you start specializing. You have what is known as the division of labor. People start specializing in different areas. Okay. And then as you can see, right, this is like economically advantageous because now maybe you're really good at making chairs. And so you could just focus on what you're really good at. And that guy's really good at raising chickens, so he can focus on what he's good at. And then you get the specialization here. And then when it gets all the way up, like if that's step 1 and step 2, now you're at step 400,059, whatever. When you're all the way up, you get to a level of like a modern economy where somebody is specializing in, post-construction Southern American history in this decade. They're not just doing history. They're doing this one very specific part of history, but they're a master at that. So the more you specialize, the more people can be masters of this little domain. And then you can trade with everybody else and you essentially get the mastery of every domain, right? So like right now, as I'm recording to you, like I know the stuff that I'm talking about, but I don't know anything about how a microphone's made, how a computer's made, how a camera's made, how the internet is maintained. Other people, other experts have figured all of that out, and I don't have to worry about any of that. I can just do what I'm good at, and then with the money I make from what I'm good at, I can purchase the knowledge of all these other people. That's essentially how an economy gets very advanced. What that relies on is that you just trust people in other industries. I don't need to know the details of how a camera is made. I just know that this one is pointed at me right now and it's working. That's all I need to know. So anyway, my point is just that when it comes to like these pharmaceutical drugs, I think most people just have the idea that like, oh, scientists have figured out how to do this stuff. I'm just saying, go look into it a little bit more, and it's really not like that at all. Is it always an interesting story to me is Viagra. And if you're familiar with the history of Viagra, which is, I believe, like there's other like substitutes that I think have like maybe even overtaken Viagra at this point, but Viagra was the most successful pharmaceutical drug for many years. I don't know if it still is, but for a period, Viagra was the #1 selling pharmaceutical drug in history, which says something about our priorities as a society. But so Viagra was it was in clinical trials as a blood pressure medication. I believe it was blood pressure or something heart related. And it just didn't work. It just didn't work for lowering your blood pressure. But as they're doing these trials, they got a lot of feedback from people who were on it. And the people who were on it were like, they're like, my heart's still not good, but I have a raging boner like I've never had in my life before. And then they went, okay, just prescribe it for that. This is real. You can go check this out. You can go verify this yourself. That's how the drug came to be. Like this is the level of science that we're talking about here. Okay. And I don't know, man, have any of you guys ever taken Adderall before? Yeah. Have you? Because it is a powerful drug. And we give this out to 6-year-olds, to 6-year-old boys because they don't want to sit still all day because they're literally not made to do that. And so we drug them up. Just think about how insane this is. It's pure madness. And It's unbelievable that we only just now have the potential to have a director of Health and Human Services who even cares, who even sees that as an issue. Now look at this, some of those numbers Bobby was just rattling off, but imagine 4%, 4.5% of the world's population is responsible for 70% of the profits from pharmaceutical drugs. And we lead the world in chronic illness. It's not like we have this and therefore we're way healthier. I mean, listen, these drugs that now we have like a generation of taking these powerful SSRI drugs for anxiety and depression. So is anxiety and depression cured? Oh no, they're worse. They're worse than they were before we were drugging our country up. Now think about that. Think about the fact that, like, listen, I'm no scientist and I'm no genius, but to me, if you have an illness and then you come up with the cure, you would think you would see the illness going down. Is that a reasonable expectation? But we don't see that. We've become a completely drugged up society. By the way, in the same time period that we were fighting a war on drugs, we're throwing people in cages for decades-long sentences over drugs. And yet our society is completely drugged up legally with drugs that don't solve the problem. It's pure madness. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Lumen. I've told you guys about Lumen for a while now. It's an incredible product. Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath. And on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs, and it gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, workouts, sleep, and even stress management. If you guys have looked into like the new diets that everybody's doing, this is what everybody's always talking about, like eating a certain diet so that you know when your metabolism is burning fat or burning carbs. But it's a lot of guesswork until Lumen came out. Now you can just breathe into your Lumen and you know exactly what's going on with your metabolism, which is your body's engine. It's how your body turns the food you eat into the fuel that keeps you going. And because your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does, optimal metabolic health translates into a bunch of benefits: easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, better sleeps, plus much more. And then Lumen isn't just going to tell you what your metabolism's doing, but on the app, it gives you recommendations to improve your metabolic health. So this is the next step in improving your health. Go check them out right now at lumen.me/problem, and you're going to get 15% off your Lumen. That's lumen.me/problem for 15% off your purchase. Thanks to Lumen for sponsoring the episode. Let's get back into it. All right, here, let's I do want to get to this, but I guess we're not going to have time for the Tulsi preview today. This took longer than I thought. Let's play the Bernie Sanders clip, because I have to play this before we wrap up.
Because I'm running out of time. I think the gist of what you're trying to say today is you're really pro-vaccine, you want to ask questions. You have started a group called the Children's Health Defense. You're the originator. Right now, as I understand it, on their website, they are selling what's called onesies. These are little things, clothing for babies. One of them is titled Unvaxxed, Unafraid. Next one, and they're sold for $26 a piece, by the way. Next one is No Vax, No Problem. Now you're coming before this committee and you say you're pro-vaccine. Just want to ask some questions. And yet your organization is making money selling a child's product to parents for $26, which casts fundamental doubt on the usefulness of vaccines. Can you tell us now that you will, now that you are pro-vaccine, that you're going to have your organization take these products off the market?
Senator, I have no power over that organization. I'm not part of it. I resigned from the board.
Yeah, that was just a few months ago. You founded that. You certainly have power. You can make that call. Are you supportive of this?
I've had nothing to do with
Are you
leadership.
supportive of these onesies?
I'm supportive of vaccines.
Are you supportive of this clothing, which is militantly anti-vaccine?
I am supportive of vaccines. I will. I want good science, and I want to protect.
But you will not tell the organization you founded not to continue selling that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say, man. Bernie Sanders is such a fucking blowhard. I just can't. I mean, it's just so. That's unbelievable to me that he led the movement that he led, and was such a force politically just very recently. Now, of course, he did. I think he doesn't quite have the juice he used to have because he totally bitched out at the end of the day, and he took this mass movement that he had around what he called democratic socialism, which is really not democratic socialism, but whatever. I'm not sure he actually knows that. I've seen a few people point it out to him before, and Bernie Sanders really doesn't know stuff, which is something that a lot of people, never really understood. I don't know if you remember when he was on Bill Maher and he got asked what he thinks, where he stands on the debate between equality and equity, and he had no idea what they were talking about. I'm like, imagine being Bernie Sanders, the most famous leftist in America. You don't even know like the most basic leftist terminology. Anyway, he lost a little bit of juice because he took that huge movement that was against capitalism and tried to feed them to Hillary Clinton and then to Joe Biden, somewhat successfully, by the way. But I mean, listen, this just the way Bernie Sanders goes at you for, this organization is making money. Oh, look, they're selling these things for $26 a pop, says multimillionaire Bernie Sanders with his 3 homes. Like, oh yeah, he demonizes everyone else for making money. But and then if you've seen when he's pressed on it in interviews, then he gets so defensive if you ever do the same thing to him. You ever do the same thing to him? He goes, yeah, I sold the book. And if you want to make money, you could sell a book. Now, making money is okay as long as Bernie Sanders is doing it. The other thing is that, like, first of all, I got a couple little kids. $26 for a onesie is a very reasonable price. I don't know what to say. If you find a onesie for cheaper than $26, you found a pretty good deal. And that's not like I don't know why he went out of his way to mention the $26, but it's not a particularly high price for a onesie. It's like, yeah, that's about what a onesie would go for. The other thing is that, like, as if this needs to be said, but like what people put on a onesie for their baby, it's not supposed to be like a textbook. Like it's not like they're like, here is my argument. I have my precise policy views that I want to explain to you. And I do that by putting them on a onesie. They're supposed to be cute and catchy. That's the idea. And listen, I don't know this. I don't know enough about this organization. Obviously, Bernie Sanders doesn't know that much either, as he asked Bobby Kennedy if he would put a stop to this and then found out that Bobby Kennedy is no longer affiliated with the organization. I'm just saying my guess from this is that seems like they were probably onesies that they started selling during COVID. And it was probably referring to the COVID vaccination. The one that said, what did it say? Like, no vaccine, no problem. That seemed to me to be a play on the vaccine passports. Remember when we instituted apartheid in America for a few months? Remember when we made everybody who wouldn't consume a pharmaceutical product second-class citizens in their own cities when they couldn't go to sports games or restaurants or bookstores or whatever? Remember that period of time? Seems to me like they were playing off that. And by the way, it would seem that Bernie Sanders maybe would care about that issue, seeing as how his whole thing is supposed to be caring about the marginalized and the people who don't have equal access or whatever the bullshit he's always rambling about. Oh, and his other leftist shit. I mean, it was disproportionately blacks and immigrants who didn't want to get the vaccine. So do you care about that? I mean, there are all these Democrats always talking about how having an ID to vote is racist because it disproportionately affects black people. Yet when it disproportionately affects black people to ban them from restaurants, that's not right. It's all just so ridiculous. But you see who Bernie Sanders really is here. It's like when there's actually, like, as I got back to before, I'll end the show on this, tying it together. Okay. Back to what I said at the beginning of the show, where it's not really about ideology. It's about, the dynamic is much more like the corrupt versus the not corrupt, liars versus honesty. That's the dynamic much more than it is left versus right. And when it really matters, okay, and it comes down to it, and somebody like Bobby Kennedy is a threat to power, and you see literally, quite literally here, the powerful coalescing around keeping this threat to power out, right? The senators keeping out the dissident potential health department secretary. When it matters, where's Bernie Sanders? He's on the side of power, being a fucking blowhard, giving this bullshit speech, trying to make Bobby Kennedy look bad. That's where Bernie Sanders falls down when it matters, as always. As always. The guy LARPs as a representative of the people. And whenever it comes down to it, when it really matters, he falls in line with power. Just like when he endorsed Hillary Clinton at the DNC in 2016. You know? He had this huge movement, this mass movement of people who hated big banks and hated the billionaire class rigging the system in their favor and hated the forever wars. And he got them to support Hillary Rodham Clinton. You know, the person who gives speeches for $500,000 to big bankers and tells them in those speeches, don't worry about what I'm saying publicly. I say one thing publicly, but I say a different thing privately to you. Now, in that moment, when it really mattered, look at what the Libertarian Party just did with Donald Trump. We got Ross Ulbricht freed because, look, we represented a voting bloc and he wanted to court us, and he knew this was a thing that we wanted. So we were able to get a concession out of him in exchange for our support. You know, like it or no, don't like it, that's politics. Bernie Sanders had tens of millions of Democratic voters in the Democratic primary. And then Hillary Clinton and the DNC cheated him out of it. And this came out. The WikiLeaks dump had come out by the Democratic National Convention. They knew that Hillary Clinton and the DNC had cheated against Bernie Sanders, and he had so many chips. He could have sat there and said, like, well, you know what? I'm taking my voters and walking, and we will cost you this election because we don't believe in people who, you know, we hate the big bankers and the wars and the powerful and all this shit. Or he could have at least extracted some serious concessions. I mean, if we could get Ross Ulbricht free, he could have gotten almost any damn policy promise he wanted to. And what did he do? He got none of that and just told all his supporters to go support Hillary Clinton. When it comes down to it, Bernie Sanders is not a dissident. He's always on the side of power. Screw that guy. All right. That's our show for today. The members only episode is not going to be tomorrow. We're going to try to get that done Friday because me and Rob will be traveling out to Louisville tomorrow. Looking forward to the shows. ComicDaveSmith.com for all the ticket links. Catch you guys soon. See you later.